So this is a pool. It's a little pond not far from my home. My home is just over there, and I'm hoping that the camera is now at the right angle and everything, so you can actually see what I'm doing. It's a scene that I've done before. It's a scene that I like, and I'm intending to just do a quick small painting today. I'm a bit torn between doing the pool, which is gorgeous because the light's catching these and is just sort of lovely with the sky reflection in there and the dark and then the shadow of the trees and all those different tones in there. However, I think I'm going to stick with the field that you can see beyond. It's one I've done before, and I'll have another go at that. So here we are. Hopefully you can see the scene. The scene's there. It's this field and it's the trees beyond, and that's what I'm going to be painting. So say the pool is very tempting, but I'm afraid maybe later. We'll see how it goes. Very tempting, but that's not for swimming. I'm going to just do a simple landscape over there and see how we get on. Here's my setup. So the setup is my Alla Prima Poche box. It's got a drawer there which has got my all of my paints in. It's got my brushes here. It's got my 2 palette knives. I've got a cloth for cleaning. Got a kitchen roll underneath here on one of the handles on my tripod. I've got a bag there for all the rubbish as it goes along. I've got a little panel here which is just a 6x8 panel, and that's the panel that I'm going to be painting on. It's Jackson's panel. It's pre-prepared. It's prepared with gesso and a coating of burnt umber. Just nice tone, nice colour for this kind of work. So that's where I am, and that's my setup. I'm going to do a little drawing of the scene, and then I'll pick this up again. Okay, so a couple of things I didn't mention last time, and they were still in the bag. One is that I've got a little pot in here of thinners for thinning the paint. That's just a mixture of linseed oil with terps, and it's just nice. It thins the paint down fine. And then I've got my brush washing pot down here, and my brush washing pot obviously is just filled with ordinary, actually zest it, just for cleaning off the brushes. So that's the entire setup. Back up to here, I hope you can see, here's the palette, paint, and occasionally obviously I'll step to one side so you can see the scene that I'm working on as well. Okay, my quick sketch of the scene. Major thing I'll have to think about here is that I'm going to think about where I'm putting this horizon, how much sky I want in and how much of the foreground I want in. A little bit about proportion as well, so this may be 1 or 2. Quite often I'll use a sketchbook and play with the sketchbook to sketch this out before I actually start and just get the feel of it. But what I'm going to do here is I've got a tree. It's kind of in the middle over there, and I want that tree to be not in the middle. I want it slightly off centre. I want it to be just here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch that tree, get the sort of sense of the size of the tree that I want it to be in here, and then I'm going to try sketching everything else around that, using that as the focal point, as this kind of I don't know, as the pivot point of the whole painting. So there's my tree on the edge of the field. Now I know that there's a line at the top of the hill. Unusual in East Anglia to get a hill, but we've got a hill. And the tree, the line of that comes across like this. We'll just follow that through. The edge of the field comes down and keeps coming down. Now I've got this thing about measuring angles where I use my pencil. And I put my pencil out and I line it up with the edge, and then I see it as where it would be if this was if my pencil now was the minute hands on a clock, minute hand on a clock. And that way I can measure how many minutes to the hour this is. And I'd say that that's probably about 13 minutes to. I'd say that's about 13 minutes to. So it's just a quick handy check on that. Now coming across now, I've got this edge of the field. This edge of the field is really where there's some lovely things going on with shadows and things. As the morning goes on, I'm likely to lose some of those shadows. We've got a big tree here. This is almost twice the size of that one, so I'm going to sketch that in. Give myself a sense of where that is. In front of that tree there's some sort of scrub grass. So still sketching this. One of the nice things about these boards, these pre-prepared boards by Jackson's, is that it's very easy to erase your sketch as you go along, just by wetting your finger, or I suppose you could use a damp cloth, but I can just erase it. So now what I've done is I've shifted the composition across, coming across. What I really want is I want to get something of this hedge line in, and what I might need to do is take a bit of artistic license here, and push the hedge slightly further across. Okay, that's a little Cherokee, so we're going to come back there. We're coming back. I've got that little tree, still my focal point. I've got a bush that's in front of that there. I've got a distant tree, that's a little bit confusing, but bigger than that, so we'll get that sketched in. Bush in front of that. A little bit of a post and rail here, that's actually where our horse is, it's just in there. And then coming down here, we've got this bigger tree. That's going to now come right up to the top there, which is quite nice. I like that, coming off the edge of the painting. Strong sign. Field edge there, coming down like that, and then going off there. And then we've got these shadow lines which are coming across from here. Okay, beginning to look alright. Along this ridge up here, there's another line of trees. I'm just going to suggest some of those, just to remind myself when I come. So there we go. Then in this field, I'm feeling as though this sort of portion of the painting has got a bit lost at the moment. But what I want to do is that there's these lovely tractor lines, and they're coming down like that. Now that angle is probably 12 minutes past, something like that. They're coming down and going off here like that. And there's a second set as well, so we can get that second set in there. I'll lose all this when I'm painting anyway, but it's sketching. This is more about getting my head together than it is necessarily about something that I'm going to use when I paint. So it's, as you can see, I'm playing with the composition, I'm thinking my way through the composition, and that's quite important at this stage in the sketch. Okay, a nice little hoverfly paying a visit. So how's that looking? Okay, that's not bad. I mean, I wouldn't say it's okay. It's all right. And then I just want a slight rise on that there. Certainly, okay, it'll test out the GoPro and it will tell me whether things are working or not. And from your point of view, I'm hoping it'll give you a flavour of the kind of thing that I'm producing here. So there's the painting, there's the setup. Let's start applying some paint. So using a Rosemary & Co set of brushes that are a Poche box set, which are really quite lovely. There's enough variety of brushes there. They shorten the handle so they fit in the box. Good set. And I think they're Rosemary & Co Ivory Poche set. Right, I'm aware that my painting seems to be a bit on the lean. Actually, if I can write that. That's better. Okay, so here we go. sky, beautiful blue sky. Not many clouds, just one or two low clouds in here. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of ultramarine blue. I'm using a very limited palette. Titanium white, cad yellow, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue and burnt umber. All right. So obviously the sky is light blue. However, down at that horizon line, what I'm aware of is that it's not just bright blue. It's actually got a little bit of yellow in there as well. Now, obviously, when you mix yellow with blue, you're going to get a green, which is tricky. You don't want really too green a sky, but you do want a sense. And my logic says, well, if it is blue mixed with yellow, it's got to be some greeny tint in there. But let's just try this now. We're getting our first line of painting, just a little bit of sky going in. As you can see on the brush, I've not mixed this colour too finely. In other words, I'm hoping that as I work, other colours in the mixture will come through. I like my skies to have a bit of energy to them. I'm just going to shut up for a while now, get on with the painting. Okay. Now, top of this tree does have some sky holes through, so I'm going to go over that. Sky holes are normally a bit darker than the sky beyond, but if we need to adjust that later, we can do. So, there's first stab. A little bit bluer at the top, I think. It's a nice sunny day, beautiful day today. Usually, days when I can paint, it's not so great. Days when I'm in the studio, it's beautiful. Right. Okay. Now, I want to do the field as it sweeps down around the trees and down into the foreground here. So I want to do that field. Now, looking at it from here, because it's very, very young, I think wheat, I'm fairly sure it's wheat, and it's still green, it's not ripened yet. Hopefully as the year goes on, I'll do a couple more of this and you'll see as the wheat ripens. But it's still this kind of grey-green, really. So we can start with our mix here. We've got a lovely grey-green here, which is not too bad. It's not too far off where I want it to be. What I'm going to do is, as it comes down, I'm going to intensify the warmth in there a little bit. But let's just start with this light green and see how we get on. Clean the brush off a bit might be helpful. So taking a squint along the side of the canvas just to check that colour out. It's always tricky because your canvas is never quite in the same light as the painting that you're doing, as the scene that you're doing. That's in full sunlight. This has got the light coming across from the side, so this is inevitably a shade or two darker than that. And you end up actually judging it. I think I want it a bit brighter than that. I think I want it a bit lighter and brighter than that at this point. And then if I need to, I'll move it back later. But it is quite intense sunlight on there. Okay, as we move forward, it's going to get warmer. A little bit more yellow, a little bit more of the green in there. It is quite a set of acid colours. There's not a lot of olivey, warming red in there at the moment. So I'm sticking mainly to my pure green. This nice shift of colour through there. At this stage of the painting, you're really putting paint on rather than making a fine judgment, but that's not too bad. Okay. So I'm going to start putting in this line of distant trees. I don't want to get too strong. Classically, Monet would have put in purples and violets and moved them back even further. For today, I'm going to stick again to this same set of colour mixing. It's going to be a little bit stronger than the other colours, but not too much. And the other thing I need to do is just, if you look at that green, it's much too bright a green. And if I put that in, it's going to come shooting forward. So to reduce the chroma, reduce the intensity of the colour in that, just adding a little bit of burnt umber. Now, as I add that burnt umber, it will make it slightly olivey. Burnt umber and the blue will give me a grey. And therefore that colour begins to come together. One of the things I also do is get the colour on the brush and just try the colour against the object. Trying to keep the end of the brush in bright sunlight as that's in bright sunlight, so that the two are in similar light, and get somewhere near with it. Let's just try that. Okay, not too bad. It's a long way off, so I'm going to play a bit of a game with it and just make it slightly more blue than it really is, because I don't want it dominating the rest of the painting. Also trying to make it interesting. I don't want them all the same size and shape, even if they are all the same size and shape. So. They are becoming a little bit all the same size and shape. Quite nicely, just around here, there's some, I suppose they're sort of conifer things, evergreen type trees. So I'm just going to change the colour. Again, I don't want it getting too strong. I'm using burnt umber in there to keep it grey, but I'm just going to change the colour and get a slightly different feel there. Okay, then we're going to move into this bigger tree over here, so go behind it a little bit. Right, I want to introduce a little bit of shadow into those trees, not a great deal. The more contrast, the more tonal contrast I put in that distance, the more it's going to bring it forward. And I really want this portion of the painting to go well back. So I'm careful about how much tonal contrast, but I do want a little bit just to keep it interesting across there. Okay. Right, so now we're moving down to this bigger tree. As things come forward, they get warmer. So when I start to do the mix for this tree, I'm just going to add a little bit more of the yellow in here. Warm it up, still keeping it fairly cool. That's about right. I'm just going to work over the top, working alla prima like this, working wet on wet and in one go. Particularly on a very smooth board like this, you do tend to find that you're letting the paint slide around a bit. No bad thing. I've forgotten to do the field as it moves across there. Stupid mistake. So luckily I've still got some of that on my palette. Just going to go in there. That's hello fly. Obviously still got some breakfast on my hands or something. Okay. I don't want this a markedly different green from that, so going back in. Okay. Right. Back to that mix. My mid-distance tree. Shadow of that tree. Now, where the shadow is on the ground there, I've just used the green really because it's tonally about right. Just going to add a little bit more purpley blue to that, mixing a little bit of the alizarin crimson in with the ultramarine blue just to give me a grey purple, and just use that through that just to alter it slightly and make it distinguish it really from the rest of the tree. Now that tree has quite a distinctive shadow, and there's another little tree just beyond it. I don't want to confuse it. I'm going to leave that little bush thing out because it's going to confuse the scene. So I'm just going to go back in. I'm mixing again the burnt umber with a little bit of the ultramarine blue, getting a little bit dark. I don't want it too dark at this stage. I've still got a long way to go with these trees down here, and I want them to be stronger. So I'm just going in now a little bit of this darker mix. Quite important to have enough paint on your brush when you go in alla prima like this, because you can make a mark like that and it just disappears. So fairly thick paint going in. Okay, and then the other thing that I'm going to do is just take a little bit of the lighter paint and just put it on this side just to make it clear. Light's coming from this side. Now underneath that we start to get the edge of this field, and in actual fact it's almost indistinguishable from the actual field beyond. I'm just going to drag it through like that, but it does need to be lighter. It's always this balance between what you want to see and how you want your painting to be and what is actually there. Okay, so I'm not going to put in one of these trees that's up and behind. Again, it's got the potential to be a bit confusing, but we'll stick with it, I think. So again, I want this side in the shadow, I want this side in the light. Having put it in, let's Just going to mix up some light, which is quite a light. It's a definite green. It's not a yellowy green. I'm mixing. Probably getting near to where it should be. And again, plenty of paint on the brush. Otherwise, you put your brush down on it and nothing will come out. So there we go. Getting some light on that side of the tree. Moving forward, edge of the field here. So back into my mess of greens here, lovely. And there is this tree, this bush, which is in front of that, on the edge of the field. From the point of view of the painting, it's almost indistinguishable. This from that. From the point of view of that, there's another bush here which I can actually use. I'm just going to put that in. But there's a very dark shadow area in there which will help give me the shapes that I want. There we go. Okay. We start getting the cast shadow of the big tree through here. And so that's casting its shadow across. I'm going to work on that big tree for a bit. And then I'm going to work on these little spaces behind. Big tree, I'm going in with my darker green again, a lot of burnt umber. It is very, very dark in its shadow area. And this is going to be quite a major feature of this particular little study. I think that's probably about right. There's a bit more of the blue in there. As I say, it's big. I want it to come over the top of there. Okay. A bit more. Okay. And then as it moves across into the light, I want it to get obviously lighter, more yellow, a bit more white, and start to paint this in. Always the thing about mixing plenty of paint. Always the thing where most of the time you think you've got enough and you haven't quite. So nice thick paint going in here. One of the nice things about today is this strong sunlight creating light and shade. Okay. It's a little bit greener than I got it. I've got it a little bit grey yellow. Let's go with a bit more. Just tease that up a bit. Back to the dark. Underneath these is going to be some of my darkest areas. So I actually put a little bit more alizarin crimson in there to really darken this, but also keep it lively. So I don't want it to get too sort of muddy with the burnt umber. And the alizarin crimson will just lift it slightly through there. Okay. So we're beginning to get our field edge now. As that comes down, we've got trees which are much nearer, but I have got a definite field edge here, and then it comes up like that. Good. So into this now, carefully, I want to start to work some dark in this corner. And then a lighter, brighter green as it comes forward. Being attacked by flies today. Now we've got a shadow area underneath these trees, which isn't very green. It's again very dark, but it's picking up over the top of the stubble and things. Beyond that, at the edge of the field, there's old grass, and the old grass is quite warm yellow, not quite that bright, but a little bit of burnt umber in there, but very, very warm, light yellow. Probably a bit brighter than that. And a little tiny bit of alizarin crimson in there. Again, it's looking at the tone, the value, and then thinking about the colour. Even lighter than that. One of my things with students is that when it is a lot lighter than the colour you've got, then don't keep. Again, the burnt umber with a little bit of the ultramarine blue, getting a little bit dark. I don't want it too dark at this stage. I've still got a long way to go with these trees down here, and I want them to be stronger. So I'm just going in now a little bit of this darker mix. Quite important to have enough paint on your brush when you go in alla prima like this, because you can make a mark like that and it just disappears. So fairly thick paint going in. Okay, and then the other thing that I'm going to do is just take a little bit of the lighter paint and just put it on this side, just to make it clear. Light's coming from this side. Underneath that, we start to get the edge of this field, and in actual fact, it's almost indistinguishable from the actual field beyond. I'm just going to drag it through like that, but it does need to be lighter. It's always this balance between what you want to see and how you want your painting to be, and what is actually there. Okay, so I'm not going to put in one of these trees that's up and behind. Again, it's got the potential to be a bit confusing, but we'll stick with it, I think. So again, I want this side in the shadow, I want this side in the light. Having put it in, I'm just going to mix up some light, which is quite a light, it's a definite green. It's not a yellowy green. So I'm mixing probably getting near to where it should be, and again plenty of paint on the brush, otherwise you put your brush down on it and nothing will come out. So there we go, getting some light on that side of the tree. Moving forward, edge of the field here, so back into my mess of greens here, lovely. And there is this tree, this bush which is in front of that on the edge of the field. From the point of view of the painting, it's almost indistinguishable. This from that. From the point of view of that, there's another bush here which I can actually use. I'm just going to put that in. but there's a very dark shadow area in there which will help give me the shapes that I want. There we go. Okay. We start getting the cast shadow of the big tree through here. And so that's casting its shadow across. I'm going to work on that big tree for a bit, and then I'm going to work on these little spaces behind. Big tree, I'm going in with my darker green again, a lot of burnt umber. It is very, very dark in its shadow area, and this is going to be quite a major feature of this particular little study. I think that's probably about right. There's a bit more of the blue in there. As I say, it's big. I want it to come over the top of there. Okay. A bit more. Okay. And then as it moves across into the light, I want it to get obviously lighter, more yellow, a bit more white, and start to paint this in. Always the thing about mixing plenty of paint. Always the thing where most of the time you think you've got enough and you haven't quite. So nice thick paint going in here. One of the nice things about today is this strong sunlight creating light and shade. Okay. It's a little bit greener than I got it. I've got it a little bit grey yellow. Let's go with a bit more. Just tease that up a bit. Back to the dark. Underneath these is going to be some of my darkest areas. So I actually put a little bit more alizarin crimson in there to really darken this, but also keep it lively. So I don't want it to get too sort of muddy with the burnt umber, and the alizarin crimson will just lift it slightly through there. Okay, so we're beginning to get our field edge now. As that comes down, we've got trees which are much nearer, but I have got a definite field edge here, and then it comes on like that. Good. So into this now, carefully, I want to start to work some dark in this corner. And then a lighter, brighter green as it comes forward. Being attacked by flies today. Now we got a shadow area underneath these trees, which isn't very green. It's again very dark, but it's picking up over the top of the stubble and things. beyond that, at the edge of the field, there's old grass, and the old grass is quite warm yellow, not quite that bright, but a little bit burnt umber in there, but very, very warm light yellow, probably a bit brighter than that. And a little tiny bit of alizarin crimson in there. Again, it's looking at the tone, the value, and then thinking about the colour. Even lighter than that. One of my things with students is that when it is a lot lighter than the colour you've got, then don't keep adding white to the colour. Put some white down and add the colour to the white. It's got a bit big. I'm going to push that back. Clean up the brush. Work from the colour the other side and use that to push that into the place that I want it to be. Pushing that colour with a brush is only going to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And so by coming in, not the colour I wanted at all. But as that comes down, and here's a joy, the way that that's in shadow has got this lovely purple colour in it. So I'm going to use it. Purple and green are great together. Darker than that. Okay. Right. Just going to push some of these shadow areas coming across. We've got the basics of the painting in place now, which is a nice place to be. I begin to see where it might go and how it's going to go, and we're okay so far. Lots of finessing to do. Angle of this shadow's all wrong, and things like that. Things that need finessing as we move along with it. One of the things that does stand out when somebody observes a painting is what happens is, obviously, as you're painting, the sun moves around, so the shadow changes angle, and you can look at a painting and go, oh, well, all those angles are wrong because the sun's moved all over the place in it. But it's simply that the artist was painting what he saw, or she saw, and the sun kept moving around. Right, darker green for this shadow area. I really think I'm going to have to stop saying so much and start to paint more. Let's get these. I don't want them all the same size, and here's another one that creeps in down here, which might be interesting just to suggest. What's going on there? Okay, not so bad, not so bad, not so bad. tidy this up a little. Nice. Okay, now I want these track marks across the field in there, and they're only just a slight shade darker than the actual field, so I'm going to go mad with them. Obviously they're wider as they get nearer because of perspective, and one of the things that can help when you do, as I'm getting older, is just to use a bit of stick or something, and just allow yourself to steady your hand. It's much too dark. Hyde is now very interested in my stick for some unknown reason. Interesting the way that these lines move towards and away from each other. It talks about the contours of the field, and again it's another little thing that you can use just to add some interest to the painting. Be careful that you get the point of the curve right, otherwise you'll flatten the whole field off. It's probably a little bit too dark, so cleaning my brush off. Beauty of working alla prima. Just going to soften that with the brush tip, mess it up a bit. Okay, let's work on these. These are definite sort of blue-green. A little bit more blue in there. And these come down the edge of the field here, into here, across. Sounds like the neighbourhood dogs are having fun. And then we're going to go straight down and let it get wider as it comes down. Push that about a bit in a minute. When it gets down to here, it really is quite wide. But again, I don't want it quite that darker colour, so I'm going to move in. Interesting. One thing that is great is that this is a place where in the evenings I tend to bring Gilly, my dog, and she loves this spot, and I've always wondered what it is. Standing here, I'm finding out that there's quite a lot of wildlife that I don't normally see. Obviously she's aware of. Now what I've become aware of is as I've put everything in, this portion of the painting is now too blue. It's gone too cool. And that's because it was the early stages of the painting and I was trying to judge. So I'm just going to warm it slightly. Again, working alla prima, it is one of the joys that I've got. I can work straight back in. I still want it cooler than this portion of the field, but I do want it a bit warmer than it was. Maybe a little bit lighter. Better. And then into here a little bit. And use this to push into this tree, make it slightly more interesting shape. Okay, I don't really want to do a great deal more because it was intended to be just a little study. I'd love to get a little bit more of that violet in. I'm just going to see if I can sneak some in along the edge of this corner across here. And then the other thing you can do with violets and blue purples is you can just put a little bit into distant trees as well. So we're just going a little bit. It's lost some of its violet. So I'm now thinking of it more of a painting rather than a representation of that scene. And I'm thinking, okay, how do I make this now a more exciting, more interesting painting rather than just a representation of a particular scene. So changing the shapes of things. But for the moment, I think that'll do.